Hey, we are live. What's up, wrestling fans? How's it going, Kevin?
Doing good, Doug. Twice in a week. The two bros, two shows within a couple days
Two
span.
bros, two shows, and I watched our on the road, which I think we should just do everything on the road from now on. I found that incredibly entertaining.
If you didn't see it, everyone, and you're used to just tuning in on Sunday nights or catching the big broadcast here, go check out our Wednesday night show. Thank you, those who did. We did go live around midnight, Doug, I think is what time it was, in a little bit of darkness on the highway as we exited an AEW show that was actually pretty significant. A lot going on that show.
A historic for more than one reason. And after some stories start to come out from the show, but
Yeah.
you know what? You go to an AEW event, you go to a Dynamite. You're not just getting Dynamite. Well, most of the time you're not just getting Dynamite. You're guaranteed to get Dynamite and Dark. We were fortunate enough to be there for a night when Rampage was also recorded, so we got 4 hours of wrestling live.
It was a good value for the money, and it was a great show. To Doug's point, though, some of the things that we now find out about the show, we will be talking about here in a few moments. I can guarantee that. And Doug, I will say, we still have Dark to go as far as viewing. But yeah, I saw your ugly mug several times and never saw myself. So it helps to be tall and bald, folks, if you want to be on television, because he's just glowing there at ringside. I'm like, yep, there's his big head, and I'm there somewhere next to him, I suppose.
So yeah, I had actually the one place where you can actually see me the best. You can see me actually texting because I'm taking pictures of CM Punk and texting him to my friend who was like in New York with his mom at the time. I'm like, dude, I'm with CM Punk. And that's the shot the camera gets of me where I'm on my phone.
Well, we got tomorrow night. We'll check Dark and see if we see ourselves, or maybe before it filled in, maybe you'll actually see me next to the big tall bald guy.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because Dark was not as full as the full on Dynamite or Rampage. So,
but yeah, folks, if you didn't see that show on Wednesday night and you're interested in just our hot takes of what it's like as soon as we left the building, what our thoughts were, definitely check it out. And thank you for those of you who checked out last week's broadcast. The show on AEW's Uncertain Future had some of the highest engagement we've seen in some time, so much appreciated. Thank you all very much for tuning in. And Doug, tonight's main event, we're going to be talking more AEW. We got MJF, which we've planned this out for a while. This has been on the schedule for us to talk about for a month or so, and we might be having some really good timing with this one.
We may be very topical about this, and I think this is actually a companion piece to last week's show. Honestly,
true. Absolutely true. But what do you say, Doug? Before we do that,
let's get into some news, Kevin. There's just a little bit this week.
Just a little bit of news. There's always like way too much news here lately because the world of professional wrestling continues to be a little topsy-turvy. We will start, as it seems we always do, with Vince McMahon. WWE's latest quarterly filings with the SEC happened this past week, officially confirming that the company's board of directors investigation into former CEO and chairman Vince McMahon is, quote unquote, substantially complete, according to the SEC filing. WWE announced their 2022 second quarter earnings as being $328 million, an increase of over $63 million compared to this same period from a year ago. And additionally, this substantially complete investigation, it was also reported as part of this SEC filing how much this investigation is costing. To date, the WWE reported that it has cost them $1.7 million this quarter, and they anticipate an additional $10 million related to the investigation for the remainder of the year. And Doug, if you didn't hear this one, we reported last week that the special committee's investigation, they had announced they had determined that certain payments from Mr. McMahon that he agreed to make in the sum of $5 million were not related to the $14 million that was the hush money for the sex scandal, but that was money that should have been reported. Well, now we know what that money is, according to the Wall Street Journal.
I did see this.
And this is where our wrestling world and scandal and absurdity collides with our real world news and absurdity. But that $5 million went to, drum roll please, former President Donald Trump. In fact, it went to the Trump Foundation. Apparently, this $5 million in payment was the appearance fee for Trump appearing in the Battle of the Billionaires at WrestleMania. And apparently Trump told Vince, instead of giving me the money, why don't you just put that $5 million in my foundation, which Vince did. But apparently, obviously, if it's a related to a WrestleMania appearance, it should have been on the books as a company expense, and it was not.
And didn't Trump also didn't I read something where Trump also referred to this as a bonus to his appearance because of ratings or something like that, which causes a whole other level of complication on top of his appearance fee because he's publicly claiming that it's a bonus on top of fees. So that's, man, can Vince just stay out of the news? The dude retired like what, a month ago at this point?
And this is maybe just the tip of the iceberg as the SEC digs in and gets involved with what they want to look at. This is just what we hear coming out of the investigation being done by WWE on itself, essentially. So, goodness gracious. I mean, it would be like, I guess maybe years ago, if you'd have told me that one day, a former president of the United States would be entangled in a Vince McMahon financial scandal, I would be like, say what? But considering the real world news and Vince's reputation through the years, it's hard to say this one is necessarily all that surprising.
Man, every day something just bizarre from the world of wrestling.
And
every day now.
The hits keep on coming. This is something, Doug, that we reported on last week that NXT UK talent were a little uneasy by the fact that they had some tapings that had been canceled at the last minute. And at the time, it was being told to them that it was because the studio was unavailable. But now we know a little bit more. Any other given week that didn't involve a former United States president, this would be the top story by far. But there are major changes on the way to NXT UK. What they're going to do is they're going to go and transition NXT UK into NXT Europe early next year. This transition means that what we now know as NXT UK will be, in the company's words, on hiatus. In practice, NXT UK is shutting down until the relaunch, and that includes the release of a lot of talent, which I'm going to get into in a moment. But we've been seeing a lot of crossover over the last few months between the US version of NXT and the UK brand, and that is going to continue during this supposed hiatus with the UK talent that is still signed to WWE. And that includes WWE running the premium live event Worlds Collide, which is going to feature a crop of NXT and NXT UK superstars. So the company's spin is this is an expansion, which I know it technically is. You're getting all up in Europe in what they hope is a larger territory. Still, it is a far scaled back version of what was once planned for NXT expansion around the world. There was a point in time when they anticipated they would have multiple brands around the world patterned after NXT UK, including wrestling hotbeds such as India and Japan. And that, for financial reasons, pandemic reasons, the UK scene itself kind of slowing down, not as hot as it was at the time they launched NXT UK. For a multitude of reasons, they have scaled back that vision and now are going with what Shawn Michaels called an expansion, but really it is shutting down NXT UK and just doing a one external international brand instead of multi-international brands.
So at least there's hope for the Brit wrestlers, and I do like the concept of NXT Europe. At least it's a much more all-encompassing thing, not just UK. I don't know how far that the NXT Japan, NXT India, how far that would have really ran. I get what was going to what the intention was there, but I'm not sure it was the best idea.
I
But
mean, he did that one-off event with Indian talent,
sure.
and it it seemed like that one might have been a little farther down the road. On the Japanese side, there had been reports that they tried to basically buy out New Japan or some other Japanese promotion, wow. And that is the Japanese market is a big market. There's multiple players in it. They would have had a much harder time and a fight on their hands in that market. So if they couldn't have just come in and purchase something, which is kind of what they did with NXT UK, they pretty much came in and obliterated what was the hot European scene.
Yeah, they destroyed the UK British independent wrestling there.
Yes,
by just going in and scooping up all the talent. And there's some very surprising names that were released. I'm not sure if you're going to run through them all, but I mean,
I got them here. Yeah,
we'll be here for the rest of the night.
So after 6 years, NXT UK is no more, and as far as we know, not every one of these talent have commented just yet, but the featured endeavored list includes Amir Jordan, Danny Luna, Dave Mastis, Emilia McKenzie, Primate, Nina Samuels, Rohan Raja, Shaw Samuels, Sid Scala, Trent Seven, Ashton Smith, Jack Stars, T-Bone, Tioman, Flash Morgan Webster, Wild Boar, Kenny Williams, Amalie, Mark Andrews, Eddie Dennis, Saxton Huxley, and Sam Gradwell.
Man, it's a lot of people to release, and it's unfortunate. I mean, the big name on there to me is Trent Seven, that they cut Trent Seven loose. I mean, but I don't understand that if you're gonna go to an NXT UK. I mean, Trent Seven is a big name in British wrestling, and they just cut him loose. I'm not sure if his contract was up or close to being up, or if they just future endeavored him to make room for like his proteges and like Tyler Bate, who I'm sure we're going to talk about soon. But I don't know, man.
I was surprised by Zaya Brookside. I mean, her father is a British wrestling legend, and she had a pretty cool character that seemed very over. Nina Samuels is another that I was surprised with. They had a regular segment with her. She was good on the mic. Dave Mastiff had a good look. There's a few I was surprised by, but by WWE's own account, this leaves them with still 22 male talent, 12 female talent, and at least 2 announcers that are still signed to what was at one time NXT UK. So we will continue to follow this story as it develops. But I'm kind of like you. Let's wait and see. The NXT Europe thing does have some possibilities. And the Worlds Collide event will be happening here September 4th in conjunction with the main roster's next premium live event, which is Clash at the Castle. So big changes on the way for the international brand of WWE.
Big changes. Unfortunately, so many wrestlers were future endeavored, but it is a very volatile and very, very good wrestling scene right now globally. So I'm sure these folks are going to find work,
So CM Punk made the news this week.
What's he been up to, Kev?
Well, we noted if you did watch on Wednesday night, that there were some comments that seemed a little odd to us, and of course we dug into those, and sure enough, off scripted apparently directed at Hangman Page. We still have questions. No one knows exactly what the beef is between the two men, but now a lot more has been said since Wednesday night, and we know apparently the two haven't seen eye to eye for quite some time. A lot of the speculation, though, is surrounding the fact that Punk comments are considered a receipt for a Hangman promo about Punk not necessarily being the advocate for wrestlers' rights behind the scenes that he always says he is when he's talking in interviews and elsewhere, pretending to be wrestler friendly. When many think that those particular comments, though they didn't get specific, they think those comments by Hangman really referred to Punk's former best friend, Colt Cabana. Cabana was removed from the Dark Order and pretty much almost out of AEW altogether, eventually being slid over to ROH once that became a safe haven for him to not just get released. But it was thought that this was because Punk refused to work on a roster that included Cabana because these two former friends had a major falling out. basically over legal fees related to comments Punk had made about a WWE's doctor on Cabana's podcast. So, regardless of the reasons for Punk making these comments, there's been multiple reports behind the scenes that he's just unhappy in general. To some extent, there's been some worries amongst some that he might just be on his way out, that he might be leaving, that whether or not he had even shown up this past week apparently was on some people's mind, that he is that unhappy. Punk's been kind of famously difficult.
Famously difficult. I love that.
It is true. He's kind of had problems everywhere he went, and to the point of I don't know if it's to the point of him leaving the business yet again. But we do know that the pay-per-view match that was to unify those belts between Moxley and Punk has been moved up from the pay-per-view to this week's Dynamite, even though it still may actually be a secondary match on the pay-per-view. So we might get some sort of pull-apart brawl, double DQ. Doug, what do you think about all of this?
Man, I got so many thoughts on all this because Punk is one of my favorite wrestlers. I wasn't crying when he made his return, but, I was one of those goofy little marks that was out there cheering and just super excited about it. But later in the show, we're going to hear my views on what Punk did. But, it sounds to me like there are two very different camps forming, one forming around the Elite with Kenny, the Young Bucks, Hangman, of course. And then you've got another clique, for lack of a better term, forming in the back with Punk, FTR, Wardlow of all people, and, some other Punk allies where you've got, them saying that this is all Hangman's fault or this is Punk's fault. And everything I've been hearing too is the same thing. It's a receipt for, that workers' rights promo that Punk was a recipient of, that Hangman did. And then there's the other comments that were made. I guess Hangman cut a promo when Punk wasn't there. Punk didn't approve of some of the content of the promo, but it does really sound like it comes down to Colt Cabana, which Colt's hilarious, and really, if we're looking at things from an indie point of view, I don't think there would be an All Elite Wrestling if it wasn't for Colt Cabana. Not to say that Colt, was the catalyst to create All Elite Wrestling, but everything that the Young Bucks have done, Colt was doing before. And the same thing with Kenny Omega too, being the Elite. I don't think we would have had any of that if it wasn't for Colt, who paved the way for indie wrestlers to do things outside of like the big wrestling companies. Man, I don't know. I have a lot of mixed feelings about this, but I'm also very disappointed from everybody all around. I just want everybody to get along, man. We got AEW here.
Let's not mess it up.
Good.
And that's been relying on him for his whole career. And some of why I think he is so good is that he can bring that fire because it is legitimately, and that's honestly something that is going to tie into the MJF conversation we'll have here in a bit. I think that some of these guys are true loose cannons in real life, and that makes them honestly very entertaining when they are on air. But also not necessarily somebody you'd want to work with. It'd be like how much we love Ric Flair for all the entertainment he provided us through the years, but you probably wouldn't want that guy for your dad when that is not a character and that's actually the guy, right?
So and here's the thing too, because I'm very suspicious of everything. Everything is a work until it's a shoot, and sometimes it's a work shoot because I did hear a couple of reports that things were great Wednesday, that Punk spent most of his day in Tony Khan's office prior to going live on Wednesday night. Things were great, no problems whatsoever anywhere. And so then I'm wondering, is Punk that great of putting on one demeanor while his true nature is just lurking underneath, waiting to get that little red light on a camera and a live mic? And then I also think about the promo that Kenny Omega cuts after the cameras go off. We were there for that. And if you start to dissect that, which I went back, fortunately several people have recorded it and it's up on YouTube, you can see him definitely taking shots at Punk, at FTR even, talk about how they're not a tribute act and all the things the Elite are and are not. And all the things they are not are the things that FTR, Punk, probably Wardlow as well. and then other members of the roster who are rallying around Punk. It's just really interesting that there almost seems to be these two very big cliques, forming in AEW right now.
And which is funny, even using that terminology, because
Mm-hmm.
this is the kind of dissension and clique that you would see back
Right?
in WWE. Tony Khan really does have, if he wanted to be true alternative, he is being the alternative, right down to now starting to see some of the same type of problems that Vince
Yeah.
himself saw. And we're going to get into that, Scott, because, I do think that there's something to be said about the main story we have tonight and CM Punk.
See, I have my own theories on this because I think, off of Scott's comment there is Punk. I don't think Punk's blocking. I think Punk is enhancing MJF because if you watch the programs they've done in the past, those two are doing very old school wrestling. I think if MJF hadn't have had the problems he had with Khan at this point, if MJF was currently active, he would be in Camp Punk versus Camp Elite with all this. I think he would be right there with the rest of the pinnacle that still exists within AEW and Punk. But we'll talk about MJF here in a few minutes, and I think MJF is going to play into whatever's coming up because Kevin, we were there live. We didn't hear that until we go back and watch the replays of Dynamite, which I'm sure you've done because I've done. Just if nothing else, just to see if I could see myself. But those pull-up brawls led to a very late call. It's like Tony called an audible that we get Moxley Punk next week instead of All Out. So I'm wondering what's going on there, or is the whole thing still a work shoot, or a shoot worked, or a shooty shooty bang bang? I don't know.
Hey, Doug, have your Gmail handy. I sent you a couple of news items. I have a computer here that tells me it's going to be restarting. So I'm afraid I'm going to get kicked off of here. And I'm going to pass what I don't get to over to you, and we'll hop right back on because.
All right, cool. Pull it up on my phone. All right, we're good.
All right, well, good. If you got the next couple of bullet points, I'm just going to go ahead and let it restart so that I can get logged on back here. So I'll be right back.
All right. Cool. Kevin is hopping off the air, and I'm going to pop up my Gmail here up. I got my phone. I got my Gmail. So let's go. Let's see. Kevin's got some notes here about Chris Statlander in the news. I didn't realize this. Statlander's been injured and is going to be out of action. And of course, it is a shame because Statlander is an awesome talent. I love the whole alien thing. She's kind of evolved beyond that at this point. And she was getting a nice push. Kevin's got his notes here. Statlander showed on her social media that she experienced a complete torn ACL and lateral meniscus injury. Now, I've had not the completely torn ACL, but I've had some meniscus injuries and had to have it was frayed, and I was out for a couple of weeks because of that. But I'm not a professional athlete or a professional wrestler, so that is very unfortunate. We hope that Statlander does return as soon as possible, as soon as she's medically able and she can get back to things. Moving on from that, I have some notes here. Man, Kevin, I'm just going to share this with you all. These are Kevin's notes. These are my notes. Feel free to go back and pause that. I mean, these are Kevin's notes and notes and notes. Somebody puts a lot of work into this. We should be thanking Kevin when he helps back on for putting all this work into things. But we got NXT Heat Waves. Zoe Starks, who I'm not sure exactly who that is, was injured. Additionally, her partner and current WWE Women's Tag Team Tournament. Oh, Nikita Lyons. Okay, this is Starks and Lyons. I did hear about this. She was just not medically cleared. Not sure what that means. But both of those girls were out of the tag team tournament this week and did not appear on Friday Night SmackDown, a scheduled tournament. Instead, Toxic Attraction, so good for those girls, received the call up in their place. And they advanced by defeating. I actually missed SmackDown this week, but this sounds good that Toxic Attraction defeated. This almost sounds like a made-up tag team, too. I mean, like one of those last-minute just cobbled together tag teams of Sonya Deville and Natalya Natty. Nothing against either Sonya Deville or Natty, but these girls are both great. But kudos to Toxic Attraction for rolling on and actually getting a call-up. Unfortunate that Zoe Starks and Nikita Lyons were both medically not clear. We wish them the best of luck in their recoveries and hope to see them back soon. Oh, and Tennille Dashwood is done with Impact Wrestling. I saw this news story earlier today, so Kevin has covered it here and sent in my notes. Her profile has officially been removed from the Impact roster. Unfortunate. No word on what Dashwood's next move will be. For those who don't know, Tennille Dashwood was, and Kevin will tell me this when she pops back on. Was it Emma? I don't know. The Bubble Girl from very, very early on in WWE. Anybody in the comments help me out here? Who is Dashwood? Anybody? Kevin, you're back. I'm struggling here. Tennille Dashwood in WWE. Emma. I was going to call her Emily, or I told her the Bubble Girl. Remember the Bubble gimmick, right?
Exactly. She was the free-loving Emma who just
wasn't she eventually? Wasn't she early on paired with Santino too?
Yes. And then went to Ring of Honor and spent a lot of time on the independents and remade herself as a serious character. And did well. Thank you for covering for that, and I'm glad you made sense of my notes. It's probably a good thing I actually have them typed out this week.
It's funny when actually, it's good that you did, because I showed the audience your notes versus my notes, and talked about what a great job you do with noting versus my chicken scratch of like points to talk about, where you actually have very detailed notes. You can just send me this and I can just be a talking head. I just need a teleprompter instead of my phone. Although I do tend to ramble, but I'm glad you're back. But I'm just going to go ahead and take your notes and run with the news since we're down to Kota Ibushi.
Go ahead. This one's interesting.
This is interesting, and I've read about this where Kota Ibushi is not going to be returning to the New Japan, which is very unfortunate. I only heard a little bit of news about this. And he has been out for. Is it a shoulder injury? That's what I'm reading here. That you've got a shoulder injury.
Yep.
Oh my goodness! And he's been caring for his mother.
Yes, apparently.
Whoa, this I missed completely about his caring for his mother in the midst of a suicide attempt. Oh my goodness!
And during all this that he had going on personally, both with the rehab on his shoulder and all that, he ends up in a public spat with New Japan officials.
Right. Yeah, which was very public, where the New Japan officials gave some sort of very, very corporate, but also very culturally appropriate apology, to the company, not only to the company but the public. I thought that was very interesting. Where here we have chairman of the board fighting every bit of the way, not issuing any apologies, but just riding off into the sunset.
In New Japan's wrestling culture, it is very unusual for people to speak out, or for there to be the kind of problems that we almost take as second nature in our dressing rooms here in the United States. So this was kind of big news that there was such a public spat between the two. And yes, they did both fine him for his role in it, and then apologize to him for their role in it. And apparently you'd think that would maybe mend some fences, but the Golden Star may be a free agent, because it is not expected that he is going to return, despite the fact that his shoulder by this point should be healing. And they did issue that apology to him, but I don't think it's bygones.
So, and this is really interesting, because I saw in your notes here that you sent me, Ibushi's 40. I did not realize that.
He does not look it at all.
Not at all.
And one of the best wrestlers in the world.
At 40, good for him, man.
Yeah, maybe if he's met at New Japan, maybe he'll come over here to the United States.
Ibushi's always been a wrestler that's notorious for not signing a long-term contract for anyone, anywhere, and would rather work on a handshake deal than anything else. So
maybe his friend who just made his own return can shake a hand and bring him over here to Tony's world. What do you say?
I would love to see the Golden Elite once again. I was looking for my Golden Elite shirt so I could wear it tonight, but it's mysteriously vanished, Kevin. My Golden Elite shirt is gone.
If you're accusing me, I did not take it.
Not accusing you. I'm just throwing it out into the universe that my Golden Elite shirt is gone. So I went with Sami Zayn, because Sammy's awesome.
Had one last news item, Doug. We'll get to our main event. In some things here on a strategy switch for WWE when it comes to big pay-per-views. For years, cities have had to bid for the rights to host WWE's WrestleMania, just like the NFL does with the Super Bowl every year. And the rationale is, of course, that these type of events, they bring in tons of impact to the local economy, and therefore a city should pay out for the privilege of having that economic boost. But outside of WrestleMania, WWE typically has paid for the arenas and other costs associated with hosting these premium live events, but no more. Now each premium live event is going to be bid out to cities and will likely be going to, of course, the highest bidder. You'll see this at play with the upcoming Clash at the Castle. If you've noticed, it might be their first European pay-per-view in more than 30 years, but it's not happening in London or, a major European city. It's happening in Cardiff, which is nearby London, close enough. You'd wonder, why didn't they just do London? And that is because Cardiff put together a more lucrative package to win the rights. Money, 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 money.
And here's my fear with that. We're going to see all Big Four premium live events now emanating from the very progressive city of Jeddah. That's my fear. Because that oil money, man, it can buy a pay-per-view. So
it can buy a payper-view. And with that, Doug, thank you for helping and covering that news. Let's get to
man, when you got notes like this, it is a walk in the park. And again, everybody, give Kevin a shout out in the comments. Thank him for all the work he does for this, because his notes versus my notes, rewind us, pause it there and see Kevin's notes versus my notes. And look, Kevin does the heavy lifting for this show week in and week out. He deserves a shout out. Yeah, there we go. I can't make the comments go, Kevin. Thank you. I can see them. I can't put myself on the background. Yeah, thank you. I am the Jerry Lawler lawyer. I'm the Jerry Lawler to Kevin's JR.
Oh, it's only two bros with you, my friend.
Oh, I feel like I should yell about some puppies. Kevin, let's get to the main event.
Well, let's talk about people who do a lot of yelling. MJF, who we've not seen in a while, Doug, reports are he is going to be back soon, which makes our pre-scheduled topic here so very topical. More than 2 months off of our TV, and the last appearance he had was a work shoot sort of situation where his mic's cut. He's complaining about Tony Khan, lambasting the decisions to bring in ex-WWE talent and otherwise, overlooking him as the main event that he is. And reportedly, there was a lot of truth behind what MJF was expressing on camera, and it comes on the heels, really, of him legit no-showing a signing appearance and trolling everyone for the longest time over his eventual contracts in and the fact he would go to WWE if they offered him more money. So let's just take all this in parts because there's a lot to it. Doug, you followed MJF for a long time. I know you were watching YouTube videos of the guy way back in the day. I've loved him since I saw him in MLW leading the Dynasty. But what do we know about the real life personality of the character MJF?
So here's the thing, man. I watched, there's a series of documentaries that a filmmaker did several years ago that follows different indie wrestlers. I'll try and look it up so you can put it in the comments when this drops to YouTube so everybody can, click those links, because I don't, off the top of my head, I don't remember, because, you guys have seen my notes versus Kevin notes. So. But, there's Johnny Gargano. I think there's one about Warhorse. There's just, multiple indie wrestlers. And MJF is one of those that's spotlighted in that. MJF, like The Undertaker, like, Mean Mark, is in character the entire time during the documentary. MJF is MJF. This is why I always joke that, 30 years from now, we're going to find out that MJF is like this really nice guy. He's just been living the gimmick. Not sure that's actually the case, but it's a joke I always like to make, because even in this interview, he kept that mysterious, that gimmick going. He's living the gimmick, even to the point where the documentarian is talking about he doesn't even know if anything that's happened in this documentary series is even real, because it could have been a rented house and all these other things to make it appear that he comes from, wealth and everything. It's just a very, very interesting piece. And I think that really establishes the MJF character there. What is this character, this, wealthy little Jewish kid that was picked on when he was in high school, goes on to become a professional wrestler who is clearly knows his worth. And that's really where we are.
And, there really are two types of men and women in this business. Those that will surprise you to find out later on, like, oh, the Big Show is like a big teddy bear, regardless of what he is on screen. And then you hear about folks we referenced earlier, like Ric Flair, who off screen was still Ric Flair. Bret Hart off screen, still pretty much Bret Hart. Sometimes the character and the man are not that very different. And if that is in fact the case, and we don't find out years from now that he's just working us all and he's a real sweetheart, he's reportedly difficult and does stay in character at all times, or he is that character at all times, depending on which of these things ends up being true. So, Doug, to relate it to some of what we've talked about previously last week, earlier on in this show, how about all these other recent AEW drama moments? Do you think it's related to the same root cause of MJF's reported issues that he expressed, or are these separate situations that just happen to be happening simultaneously for Tony Khan?
I think, unfortunately, the honeymoon phase for AEW is over. I'm a big AEW mark. Just go back and watch our past catalog. You'll see that. Dynamite Doug hasn't been up there in a while because I'm trying to be a little bit neutral because we are kind of a news show. We're more infotainment, I think, than anything. But still, we're bringing the news to you. But I think AEW is out of their honeymoon phase, and there are issues. People are losing, people not losing their contracts, but not being renewed. Tony Khan has to make business decisions, especially after everything that's going on with Warner Discovery now, and all of that. So their TV deals anyway are part of a much bigger corporate conglomerate, and they have to produce just like anybody else in the organization. So Tony has to make tough cuts sometimes. And then there's the political, almost like an old school wrestling versus like this new school indie wrestling, kind of factions that seem to be being formed. And I really think MJF is part of that old school wrestling faction, where you've got your FTRs, your top guys, your CM Punks, your tribute acts to Bret Hart, as Kenny Omega alluded to in his promo when the cameras were off. I don't know where all this goes, but I think there are two very distinct factions forming in the background, and I think MJF is going to lean towards that CM Punk faction. Is MJF's problems related to Kenny Omega? Kenny Omega, no, or the Elite versus Hangman versus like the old school wrestlers with CM Punk? I don't think so, but I think MJF is going to be aligned with that CM Punk old school wrestling faction, and Punk.
You could have almost seen the cracks a bit forming, I guess, when the Cody Rhodes Tony Khan relationship went up in smoke. In a vacuum, you'd just be surprised by that, which at the time we were. And then you hear about MJF having his issues with Tony. And then now Punk, though, yes, notoriously difficult no matter where he's worked. But after a while, ex-wrestler and Tony Khan having issues starts to sound like, well, Sasha and Naomi, walked out on Vince McMahon. Like when it's one guy and he's the be all end all of an organization, eventually when you talk personalities this large, I think you're starting to see the strains of trying to be a one man show and head up talent while you're producing, while you're writing, and we should have mentioned this, Doug, on our show last week, and I failed to do so. But I think that maybe Tony is starting to recognize that he has problems beyond what he can handle, because they have made recently some substantial management changes that we've yet to mention here on air, with bringing in the likes of Sanjay Dutt and QT Marshall and Pat Buck, Madison Rain, all either bringing them in or elevating them into an increased role backstage just to assist Khan with running the company, because I think that these butting of heads that we keep seeing now on a more frequent basis can't be seen as just isolated incidents anymore. This is the burnout and the issues you have in a competitive, environment where you have men and women jockeying for spots and money and ratings and airtime. And you got one guy who's basically all that's running through. It is the Vince McMahon problem all over again.
It really is the Vince McMahon problem. I mean, we touched on this last week where Tony Khan has like what, 5 different companies we're running, 2 wrestling
Yeah.
companies, 2 professional sports companies, and an analytics company. But then we joked about, after seeing him live and seeing how much just really manic energy this dude has,
Man.
and kudos to Tony with all that ridiculousness going on backstage and in the public eye where Punk goes into business allegedly goes into business unless we're all being worked, which is of course in the back of my mind is still a possibility that we're all being worked too. But I mean, he definitely has the show must go on attitude where he's out there when the cameras stop rolling, he's doing bits with Danhausen and the best friends, and he's pumping the crowd up before the Rampage tapings, before Dynamite goes live. There's a lot of energy there. Tony's dealing with a lot, and I think the man. First of all, he does have too much on his plate. Yeah, and I really wonder about that too. Did Cody see this? The diminished roles that the executive vice presidents have within the company, where Tony was starting, the promoter, the booker. Tony Khan was the Vince McMahon, is the Vince McMahon of
And
AEW.
Cody is a great spokesperson for an organization, and therefore he is way more corporate than a MJF or a Stone Cold or other people who, through the years, we know of have had public spats with the office. And so Cody has said the right things to not burn any bridges, wishing AEW well, proud of the baby he created. But he's also been honest enough that it has been made apparent, if you've seen enough post AEW interviews with Cody Rhodes, is that he was no longer given the same power or seat at the table, and it was just time to part the ways. So that is exactly what you're talking about, David Poole. He saw that writing on the wall. He wasn't going to be there to mitigate some of these things. He wasn't going to be there to help satiate talent by keeping them happy. It was going to be one person, and he probably knew that one person cannot keep everybody happy when you have 100 or so wrestlers and only so much airtime. Which one brings me to the next thing I'd like to talk about, Doug, and that's pretty much the content of that promo the last time we saw MJF on screen. It's reported that what really happened was at some point MJF early on went to Tony Khan after main eventing with Mox at that one pay-per-view, asked for more money, thinking that he'd earned it, earned that spot because he was there he was there from the beginning.
Well, yeah.
So he saw himself as one of the pillars, but because he was there at the beginning, he was locked into that contract he'd signed at the beginning, and he began to see all the WWE cast-offs, as he called them, I think, in the promo, come in and earn way more than he was. And reportedly, the encounter did not go well at the pay-per-view, that he confronted Tony, and that he ended up in a shouting match and basically cussing Tony Khan out. Doug, do you think from everything you've read that this confrontation actually occurred like that? And then has Tony since then worked things out with MJF to turn this into an angle, or are those still raw feelings that you think are out there like that?
So here's the jaded and suspicious Mark in me that thinks everything is a work until it's not a work, But I think things started in reality, were probably amended and quickly rectified. This most recent thing with Punk is something completely different. But I think as far as MJF going off, no showing, I think he knows his worth, which good for him because he is worth every penny that Tony Khan or WWE can throw at him. I mean, he's got a contract until 2024, which he loves to remind everybody
Or
about.
do you think that maybe there's a chance that he's renegotiated because
Absolutely. I think he's absolutely renegotiated. He's worked this out with Tony at this point. They're going to take him off of air, let him cut his bomb promo, get him off of air for a while, and bring him back to start spiking ratings. And I really think he will be back this week, probably to add a little bit of spice to this whole CM Punk John Moxley thing.
Let's not forget that's where this was kind of heading. I mean, he was in a collision with CM Punk, and timing wise, Punk breaks his foot, so it made it very convenient for, maybe we thought he'd be off TV for a few weeks. Well, let's just play this string out until Punk's back, and so now we've had MJF gone for 2 months.
Yeah, exactly. I think the bigger storyline wise, and for a mark like me, the bigger storyline going into All Out is CM Punk, MJF in Chicago, Punk doing the deed, passing the torch to MJF in Chicago. I think is a bigger story than Punk versus Moxley and Punk going over Moxley in New York, or not New York, but in Chicago. I don't know though, man. I think that MJF is coming back. I think the issues have been worked out at this point. I'm certain. I have nothing to go on, but this gut feeling, and my gut's not up here. It's down here. I don't know why I did this.
See your gut. It's off camera, but
exactly. It's down here.
Oh well, you didn't really have to do that. We
sure I did, man. Sure I did. It's about that honesty. Two Bros is about honesty, man. Honesty. We are raw here.
Honesty. That promo, he wasn't wrong in what he was saying. I have been really happy to see who the new flavor of the week is that pops up. Like, wow, it's Tony Storm, or look, it's Swerve Strickland, or like that has been fun. But you can't tell me that as talented as they are, like someone like a Mark Henry, or even active wrestlers like an Andrade or something, has had more of an impact than what MJF has had on creating what we love as AEW. So from that point of view, to borrow a phrase from CM Punk, tell me when I'm telling lies, right?
Well, exactly.
He was not lying in that promo.
And I'm sure, just like, even to the point where he's calling Tony Khan a mark, expletive deleted mark, he ain't lying, because if you or I had $7 billion in our family and our dad said, you can start your own wrestling company, sure, go ahead.
That's exactly what we did.
Spend it while I'm here so I can watch you enjoy it. We would both have wrestling companies.
Both would. I can totally see that, Scott. I can totally see that.
I'm with you, Scott. I'm with you that way too, man. I've been thinking about that.
I mean, if you're going to not have that big match on pay-per-view, and man, was it hot. Like that, I mean, that is how you heat a feud up, with that opening segment we were lucky enough to witness in person on Dynamite this past week. If you're not going to save that for the pay-per-view, you still have to have like something even bigger than that planned, and that's the only thing that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's odd that was. It seems like there was an audible called, midway through Dynamite that night. I don't know if it's Punk going into business for himself, or maybe we're all being worked again. I'm just so suspicious of that, and that we've all been worked from the get-go about this. So, I don't know, man.
If there's no way of knowing how separate the character of MJF is from the person of MJF, but if his personality is really his character and vice versa, is he worth Tony putting up with, or should Tony just try to manage a difficult talent mess that he already has in a locker room chemistry situation? And is he just doing this to prevent him from jumping to WWE?
So here's the thing, man. I'm in my day job, I'm in a management position, and I'm reminded often that this is what management is. It's managing people. Tony Khan's job at the end of the day is to manage people. He has 2 wrestling rosters to manage. He has 2 sports team rosters to manage, and he has like a 5th analytics team to manage. But those are his jobs, to manage people. He should put people in place underneath him to help him manage people, because the people in this case are the talent. They are the people who are bringing money and bringing the revenue in. If we're looking at this, we could do a WrestleNomics on this, I'm sure. But, looking at this, Tony Khan's job at the end of the day is to manage people. I know he wants to be a booker. He wants to be Dusty Rhodes. He wants to be Vince McMahon. But at the end of the day, he's got to manage his people.
So you think that it's more worth him managing this difficult talent because he is so talented than it is to be just like, fine,
absolutely, man. Day in and day out,
we'll let your contract run out. So it's more worth it.
This is his job to manage, and management is challenging, and it's great when there's a team in place where everybody just shows up and does the work. I think everybody is still showing up and doing the work, but there are problems with personalities, and I think we're seeing that across the board. But at the end of the day, it's his responsibility to bring everybody into a room off camera, resolve any issues, and go forward. And I think to a degree he's already done that. We're not seeing that. We're getting the Dave Meltzer reports about what's going on behind the scenes, and I think we're somewhere in a work shoot. At least I want to believe that. But yeah, we'll see. Of course,
It
with all
is
the
very
panic
possible
energy, man,
that
I just don't know.
it's very possible that all we hear about the contract and when it ends and all that could have been resolved a month ago, and we've just kept between those two men themselves. But let's just say, for the sake of discussion, then that Tony isn't going to be worried about the locker room chemistry by keeping MJF around if MJF truly is difficult, and is more concerned about the dollars and cents that he sees in an MJF. And if that were the case, we might know as soon as Wednesday what that plan is, and that is in fact what is going on. MJF, unless he could get himself released, is under contract at least until January 2024. That much we know for a fact, unless he's managed to work out an extension in private. Do you think that Tony has locked him up to an extension, or do you think MJF will test that free agent market to see how much money he can get in January 2024?
I think Tony Khan at the end of the day is a very smart businessman. I mean, he has his father's money that he's working with, but I think still you have to be your own man at some point. And I think Tony has proven that he can be that. I think Tony is a shrewd businessman. He's made those deals behind the scenes. He also knows how to work us and people like us who have a lot more contacts within the industry, who can get the stories and drop just enough crumbles. Same thing with, I think, what Triple H is going to start doing within WWE, working the dirt sheets. I think both, if we're looking from a creative standpoint, Triple H and Tony Khan are both already working this. Tony Khan more so right now with MJF. I think Punk did go into business for himself on Wednesday night last week, but I think it quickly got worked into a work shoot, just like everything else in wrestling seems to be right now. And it gets so confusing. The general audience does not know what's coming or what's going, but old marks like us are trying to just dissect it. Tony knows what he's doing. Tony's already got MJF locked up. My opinion on it. Tony's already got MJF locked up. Got him a contract that is worthy of MJF, because I think he is worth more than one of those entry level, say, Marco Stunt kind of contracts when they brought him on.
So do you think he's extended, or do you think it's just, we'll give you more money to work out the rest of your contract? Because if MJF is a smart businessman, he would wait till January 2024 and let Triple H and Tony Khan start getting into a bidding war, wouldn't he?
Absolutely. And I think what we're going to see is something that meets in between there, a negotiation that meets to what Tony Khan wants, what MJF wants, and what they both need, especially with TV rights up for negotiation soon.
Well, see, there's where Tony has some added incentive, because TV rights will begin to be negotiated here towards the end of the year, at the same time that Triple H has made it apparent that he would be willing to take folks back and pay money to get folks he wants back on his roster. So
Absolutely.
The wrestling landscape has shifted beneath Tony Khan in a lot of ways. And so, the Adam Coles, the CM Punks coming back, MJF would be part of that. Like, the ratings have not been what they had been. They've been a little down. So all of this is conspiring in many ways right now to make it worth Tony's while to pony up just a little bit more, maybe more willing to negotiate than he would have been 6 months ago.
Absolutely. I think this is a perfect time for MJF. Again, a man who I definitely think knows his worth. Definitely knows his worth. And this is a perfect time for MJF to come back. I think we're going to at least see something to get MJF through that bidding war in 2024. On my birthday, no doubt. It's on January 24th.
I don't know that we'll see that, David, but that it would be pretty funny.
Yeah, I'm thinking Stokely is a mid card, mid card wrangler at this point. MJF is a star on his own. I don't see that happening, but it would be kind of cool.
Let's fantasy book. Let's say that he's got more money to at least finish out his contract. He comes back, he works whatever angles. That's still a year away. But January, 2024. Would MJF fit into the world of WWE?
I think so, because I think the world of WWE is evolving with Triple H in control of creative now. I think MJF would definitely be a talent within WWE. You remember back in the day when Jericho jumped ship from WCW to WWE, and I'm sure you were just excited, just as excited as I was when Jericho shows up and interrupts a Rock promo.
Yeah, famous.
He interrupts that promo. You've got probably the two of arguably the best talkers in the business vocally sparring. I can't wait to see something like that if MJF was given the opportunity to show up on Raw and show what he can do. I think there's plenty of room for MJF and Triple H's WWE.
MJF sparring with Kevin Owens, MJF sparring with Seth Rollins.
Yes.
MJF reigniting his feud in a nut, like I'm following you and like going after
Right.
WWE.
Exactly.
I mean, there is a lot from just a talent perspective of individuals that MJF has never had a chance to work with that you could easily fantasy book. I honestly could not see this happening nearly as much 6 months ago if we were talking and I would say, Vince McMahon wouldn't want him because he's undersized. He'd look at him and say he's too small, and then he'd hear the reputation and I don't want that cancer in my locker room. Triple H, it's an all new ball game. And I think MJF would fit into the world of WWE. And I think Triple H is smart enough to know that he would have a real steal. It wouldn't be maybe the Cody level of the prodigal son returns home, but to take that kind of talent away from Tony Khan would be something that would be a feather in Triple H's cap.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I do see some verbal sparring there for sure that could that could play out. I ultimately agree with you. I think that the obvious thing is that it was real sentiments that were expressed, and time has healed these wounds, but money heals it even faster. And Tony's smart enough to lock this guy up because he would go to WWE, because now there is a WWE that would accept him, which maybe wasn't the case literally just a month ago. So I think this is evolving, and why some of these decisions that we were talking about on the Moxley CM Punk side may be rushing some of these elements to get to MJF on television in time for the fall winter run so that we can get those ratings back up.
Yeah. I see MJF coming back. I see MJF at All Out with against CM Punk. I see Moxley and Punk next week on Dynamite, leading to Punk coming out on top. And maybe we even see MJF next week. I don't know. We're going to see MJF very, very soon, though, to get a rating spike. I think it's at this point of work. I would love a new DX. I'm not sure if MJF fits the DX aesthetic, and I'm not sure who you could form a new DX around with MJF. But
you could form a great. I mean, go back because it's all on their YouTube channel. It's all archived. Go look at the old MLW stuff where the Dynasty ran by MJF. There's an example of what a faction led by MJF could look like. And the guys that broke out of that faction once he left are still the biggest names in that company now. And that's because of the association with MJF. You got Richard Holiday and Alexander Hammerstone, who both eventually are going to end up in Tony or Triple H's hands and making big money for one of those guys, because MJF was a great centerpiece of a money-based, conceited, look at our wealth we flaunted in front of you, Four Horsemen style. They were definitely more Four Horsemen than DX, but it definitely worked as a faction. MJF, one of the most talented wrestlers around. Whoever ends up with his services, whenever they end up with those services, are definitely going to be the victors in this, Doug.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, MJF is without a doubt a great talent, without a doubt.
Let's end our main event topic with this question. Vince being out of the picture, Tony has acted like he would be willing to talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that it's still unlikely. WWE doesn't really need to acknowledge the number two. I mean, let's just be honest. That was always their attitude The only time they really started to acknowledge things is when they weren't maybe the number one by a good mile, and that was with WCW when they were really more in a war for their lives. With Impact, you saw it; they didn't bother to acknowledge them. I feel like that even though they've casually acknowledged AEW a few times on the network or in particular shows, for the most part, there's not really much of a win for Triple H and WWE to acknowledge the competition.
I agree. If anything, I think they would try and do something NXT, AEW related, and that would kind of be a downgrade to AEW being on the same level as, say, the flagship program like Raw or SmackDown. I just don't. I would love to see something like that. Love it. I mean, you use Cody as that catalyst, for the connections and everything, and it almost writes itself at that point. But I don't see it happening. While I would love to see it, I don't see it happening.
Billy Corgan, for his part in the NWA, said he'd be willing to talk to Triple H. He still has a working relationship with Tony, even though they've had butted some heads recently. He made it be known that the NWA would still be willing to work on that Forbidden Door concept of talent back and forth, and that he'd be willing to do the same thing with Triple H. But again, I don't see, with as much talent as they have and as much of a lead as they have over our number two, regardless of how great they are, I just don't see what would necessarily be in it for Triple H other than to make marks like us happy. And right. I think corporate wise, that's maybe not the play for a
that doesn't bring all the corporate dollars in, unfortunately. I mean, we could do a ton of fantasy booking with all that, but it's not going to bring the dollars of the general wrestling population consumer in.
Yeah, but excellent question, and then a good way to pivot this, because we're seeing that the wrestling economy and the wrestling landscape is definitely changing with all the backstage drama we have going on, and all the changes we're seeing in leadership, and all the changes we're seeing in money when it comes to the rights, the TV rights, and just there's a lot right now, and we will continue to stay on top of this subject, and we'll see. Tune in Wednesday night. You might see MJF as soon as Wednesday night.
We may see MJF as soon as Wednesday night.
Doug, let's hit that big finish. What do you say?
Let's do it, man. Let's hit the big finish.
All right, let's do Botch of the Week. What do you say?
Let's do it. You want to go first?
I'll go first. Botch of the Week for me. Tyler Bates appearing on Heatwave with the NXT UK Championship, even though on NXT UK television, we are yet to get out of the first round for the tournament to declare a new NXT UK champion. So essentially the last 3 or 4 weeks of NXT UK, which I guess is the last ever, this tournament that they'd already pre-filmed, they cared so little about it. Writing should have been on the wall when that happened on Tuesday night, that NXT UK was no longer a priority, because they basically spoiled their entire tournament and the next 3 or 4 weeks of television.
Man, I think you hit the nail right on the head there, and that was in my front runner for a botch too, but I went in a different direction, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But, I mean, I think the writing is on the wall there. I mean, clearly they don't care about NXT UK, and they've completely written it off by completely spoiling their recorded TV tapings that they have. I mean, Bates is a great wrestler. I love that standoff between Bates and Breaker. God, I want to call him a Steiner so bad. We need to get him up to the main roster and call him a Steiner. But I mean, it does really just say we're done with NXT UK. We don't care about it anymore. We're going to spoil our own tournament, and here's what it is. Yep. I agree. I agree with you totally and completely there.
How about your botch?
So here's my botch, man. And this hurts me to do because it's an AEW botch, and it's I feel like I'm attacking the man, but CM Punk should know better, man. I don't care if he's a difficult talent or not. You should not call out if it was a legitimate shoot. You do not call out and air your dirty laundry, not only in front of a live crowd, but in front of a live audience that is going nationwide. You don't do that kind of thing, man. That is a botch that's not necessarily towards AEW, but towards CM Punk in particular. And if it is legitimate, that's just disappointing, the ego that is there to do something like that. Because, I mean, it leaves Hangman Page in a very, very, very difficult position, because that's something that's not scripted Page can't come out and interrupt a promo that he's not involved in, or he does come out and interrupt a promo where he's involved in, which shows, a an incredible level of professionalism on his part, and the whole show shows just everything falls apart at that point. I mean, that puts the entire show within the first few minutes of it going live nationally on air, in jeopardy. I mean, that's that's not even a risk to take. That is just very selfish if this is indeed a shoot. And that's what I'm calling a botch for CM Punk. And I hate to say those words, man. It
Well,
hurts me. It really hurts me to say that.
so performance of the week. There were so many good performances in the world of wrestling this week. This one was really hard. There was the great work that Drew McIntyre and Kevin Owens did on Monday night, which was fantastic together. There was Toxic Attraction surprise entrance and calling attention to what a women's tag team that actually works as a tag team looks like by showing up on the main roster on Friday. There was Sami Zayn, Doug's shirt. There's Sami Zayn and the amazing work he did on Friday in his hometown of Montreal, taking that whole honorary Oos character to the next level, which was absolutely hilarious, priceless, well done. I was going to give this performance of the week, though, to CM Punk. But because of the very reasons that you gave, I scratched it off my list. The more I found out about like the backstage stuff,
Right.
The content of the promo that wasn't geared towards Paige was absolutely as good as you will ever see.
Absolutely.
And they were hitting each other so hard, I had to say that was masterful. And then, I can't reward the good mic work for the very reasons that you mentioned. And so instead, since he went off script, I'm giving it the feel-good return of Kenny Omega, something else we were able to witness in person. One of the best in the world, marquee performer for AEW, especially as the competition is heating up for AEW. Rights are heating up, big payday maybe hopefully coming for AEW. It's the right time to get the cleaner back. And if he seemed a little, maybe a step or two off, there was maybe a few spots where he showed the rust. There's also quite a bit of talk behind the scenes that he's working that as well. Mm-hmm. That the whole idea of the compression shirt, the sling, the taped ribs, all of that, I'm going to go over the rope and, oh man, I just can't, my knee buckled on me. All of that is him just working all of us so that once he does finally, pull the shirt off, hit the move, not struggle to get the one-winged angel. Once he does all that, the roof's going to blow off the place, and he is good enough that it wouldn't be a bit surprising if all of that was a work on us.
I love Kenny Omega too. There's so many wrestlers I actually love. I'm sure if we go back and watch our shows, there's so many wrestlers I really love. Kenny, of course, is one of those. Everybody in the Elite, way before AEW started, I was watching Being the Elite every Monday as soon as it would drop. Still do. There's a special place in my heart for the Elite. Just like there's a special place in my heart for, CM Punk and even Triple H. I'm a big Triple H mark too, going from way back to from his DX days. Kenny, it made me feel so good and so happy to see Kenny show up. I love the idea that he is living the gimmick of rebuilding the cleaner and getting back to this glory. I love that, and Kenny's great. No arguments there. But I'm going to pivot to another member of the Elite that, is kind of disconnected from the Elite right now, because sometimes the things you don't do are just as great as the things you can do or do in the ring. And we didn't see this guy on Dynamite or Rampage or anywhere, even though he was in fact in the building on Wednesday night. And I'm giving my performer of the week to Hangman Page, because Hangman did not was not fueled by ego, did not storm out to the ring. I'm not sure what was going on behind the scenes, but again, it takes a lot. If there is this legitimate heat going on between the two of them, it takes a lot not to storm out there. He's just been called out and pretty much punked, especially with Punk, going from the cowboy shit to the coward shit, in his promo on air. calling out Hangman. I mean, this is an industry that's built on, testosterone and ego. And for Hangman Page to show that restraint and understanding about what the company that he is part of, that he helped build from the ground up from day one, from back in being the elite when they all flashed their, AEW logos, that, they're starting all elite wrestling after they left New Japan. I'm giving a shout out for Performer of the Week to Hangman, who had the restraint and the understanding of the business to not go into business for himself.
And let's say this, it's one thing to not storm out there on live TV because that maybe could cost you your job if that's not part of the script. It's another thing in this day and age that you don't hear of very often is to show the restraint to not clap back on this little device that you were just pointing out.
Absolutely.
Like, he didn't reach out to a dirt sheet. He didn't tweet about it. He didn't do any of the things that we see every day in the wrestling world now, that these men and women are out there with a platform that they can reach us with their thoughts, that we don't wait on TV to see what they're scripted to say or if they go off script. They are really quick to just smack back on one another online anymore. And he did not do that.
No, FTR did that. Yeah. I believe Wardlow also did that. And yes, I would love Omega Punk.
That's a dream match that we haven't seen yet that is quite possible. And so let's talk match, Doug. Match of the week. And
I'm pretty sure our match of the week is going to be the same match of the week, Kevin.
How happy are you that we actually were able to witness such a thing in person?
Kevin, you're a wrestler. Yes, he is. They both are. My goodness. Garcia, Brian, my goodness. I feel like there's so many things Wednesday night that we saw live, in Charleston, West Virginia. I feel like Charleston got put on the map in wrestling history for so many things on Wednesday night.
Yeah. So I know sometimes that this stuff is elevated because you're there live, you're caught up in the moment. So I was curious, like, if I go home and watch it on TV, is it going to seem as good as it felt like it was in this building watching it live? I mean, other than the fact that, I do see where commercial breaks, even picture-in-picture commercial breaks, can kind of disrupt the flow of a match. Yeah. It didn't maybe seem as long on television as it did while we sat there hanging on every move in the building. But yeah, on TV, the announcers were selling it like the magic that it truly was. We were not imagining ourselves as like, wow, is this really that good? No, what we saw was a special match, and we were just lucky to be in the building for it, Doug.
It absolutely was. I mean, that was it was just a clinic, two schools of wrestling. Not schools, that's not the right word, because I mean these two are from the same school of wrestling. But you had the young and the new school. You had the veteran and the up and comer. Daniel Bryan made Garcia a star that night. Come on up here, kitty. I mean, my goodness, if you have seen this match, you know what I'm just rambling about and struggling to find the words with right now.
Garcia,
if you haven't, go watch it right now. Pause it, come back. We'll wait. Okay, you watched it. You see what we're talking about now.
It's 40 minutes later, but yeah, it was absolutely brilliant from beginning to end. The slow start, the build up, the way that the first fall ended, echoing what happened to them in their last match, so that you think psychology wise, oh man, he's got the old guy's number now, like the new kid has got it. And then of course the old guy shows that, okay, you get too full of yourself, I can just leverage your weight and then make a quick 1, 2, 3 for that second fall. And then the epic third fall that had a little bit of everything from blood to high spots to just the back and forth. It was absolutely as good a match as I had ever witnessed in person live. And again, like Doug said, Charleston, West Virginia, we happened to be there, so that's fantastic. Definitely go watch Garcia and Bryan Danielson. And with that, folks,
I had a kitty in the wires. I had to rescue.
With that, Cuddles makes her first Two Bros.
Cuddles making her Two Bros appearance.
Her debut. Doug, that is the show for this week. And folks, that is the show for the summer. As you can see from the scroll on the bottom of the screen, we're going to be off a few weeks. Holiday is going to pass, and then we'll be back at you guys in September. Until then, thank you for tuning in to the Two Bros Wrestling Show, and thank you for your support. Continue to like and comment, and we will push some content out during our break, but we'll see you again in just a few weeks.
Absolutely. Until then, go watch some wrestling, everybody.